WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisCI to 44321.
Tara Johnson of the town of Shelby is the Democratic candidate in the 96th Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Tara Johnson, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Lisa. Nice to see you this morning.
Well, thank you for participating in our candidate interview. I'll start by asking you, what is your campaign's key message? Why are you running for this office?
My key message is that government needs to be getting things done for the people who elected officials, and my track record is that I have been doing that work for a long time, and I think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in Madison that an experienced legislator like me can get accomplished, and that means things like economic issues, affordable housing, childcare, transportation, funding for public schools, reproductive freedom. Those are some of the issues that are most important that I think I will be really effective at getting done when I get to Madison.
So if you're elected, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you to introduce?
Yeah, there are a lot. The list is long. I think that there's a lot there's cleanup in aisles 1 through 15, I think, in Madison right now. Really hard to pick a top issue. I think what I'm hearing most from voters right now is probably around reproductive freedom. So that will be at the very top of the list for me.
So in terms of a bill, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that means that we codify what existed in Roe v. Wade, and that we are a state that respects the freedom of every person who lives here. And it is the exact opposite of what we have right now, which is a very draconian, old piece of legislation.
If you are elected to the Assembly, you're entering during a biennial budget year, and the state is projected to have more than $3 billion surplus. What would be your top two priorities for use of that surplus funding?
Yeah, I think just in general, when I think about surpluses, and I come out of county background, La Crosse County Board, where we had very solid fiscal footing, right? We had some of the very lowest per capita tax rates in the entire state. We had AA1 bond ratings. We were very fiscally sound, and we had rainy day funds that were available. So this is, again, something that I feel very familiar with. And I think when you go into situations like that, where you have surpluses, it really should be kind of weighing spending versus continuing to save and make sure that you have a very solid fiscal footing. So in terms of the spending side of things, anything that we do with a budget surplus needs to help middle class, needs to help as many people in the state of Wisconsin as possible. So it might be something like some housing credits or housing, ways to make housing more affordable, first-time home buyer credits, first-time home buyer loans, that kind of stuff. So housing is a place where I think it would be a good high priority use of surplus funds. I also think that the state has neglected public education funding, and I think additional spending in public schools, every K through university system, but especially K-12 systems, that we need to be making up for the neglect that has been imposed by legislatures of the past let's say, 15 years or so.
You
So those are a
mentioned-
couple of priorities.
You mentioned housing credits. Is there any other form of tax relief or tax reform that's part of your campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to say, Lisa, I don't come in with, I have not written any bills, even in my head. Like, I'm not someone who comes in with an agenda of A, B, this, A, B, that, right? It is trying to take advantage of what has worked in the past. And I do think that, first-time home buyer credits, there was bipartisan legislation last cycle that seemed to work very well, maybe growing that, continuing that. So it's not necessarily even new legislation. It's investing more in what has worked.
You mentioned K-12 education as a priority and that there needs to be more funding. What do you see as working in K-12 education, what needs to change?
So I think there's a lot that isn't working in K-12 funding right now. I think especially when I am out in the community, in the 96, there are a number of small rural school districts who are really being just burdened and their budgets are being decimated by a couple of things. One is special education funding, and that is legislation that needs to be at the top of the list also, is to make sure that the public schools, who are in large measure the only ones taking kids of all abilities and all needs, they need to have special education funding that matches the cost of providing those services.
What about higher education? 4-year colleges, 2-year colleges, technical colleges, what should be the legislature's focus in that area?
If I can just quick add the second point on the K-12 is that the voucher system is currently taking money away from public schools. And the K-12 public education system is absolutely the bedrock of our state of individuals' lives, and we need to be investing fully in that and not taking money away from that. I think in terms of higher ed, university system, pivot there, this is economic development. I mean, education, higher education, whether it's an apprenticeship program or a technical school, some other, associate's degree, or a 4-year degree through the university system, it is an investment that an individual makes for themselves, for the betterment of what they want to do and train them for what they want to do in terms of work. But it is also economic development for the state. And investing in education from K through the university system is good business for the state of Wisconsin. And again, the legislature has moved away from that in past years and cut and put, ties to and tethered it to conditional, conditions. So I think it is a wise investment. Education is always a wise investment, whatever the level.
What do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and how would you propose to address it?
Tough issue. I think, again, I would say from kind of a 30,000-foot view, this is about who we are as a state, and are we a place that people want to come and work. I think that there are probably some really great innovative ideas around workforce development or, like maybe incentive programs for doctors or healthcare providers or child care providers, right? Like those are industries that we hear about a lot that need incentives and need innovation to draw people into that workforce. I think it also is, and so I would be supportive of that kind of legislation, but it is also being a state that is welcoming, being a state that not just young people, but that we are keeping young people and we are attractive to young people, and that has to do with making sure that we have protections around natural resources, and that this is a place where they can come and recreate as well as work and enjoy the beauty of this state. The 96th Assembly District is absolutely stunningly beautiful, and that's because we have beautiful topography and geography, but it means clean air, clean water, right? Like clean earth. And so I think that part of workforce development issues include making sure that we have laws in place that make people feel welcome, that we have laws in place that are protecting natural resources. We have laws in place that have good school systems so that people want to come here and raise their families here.
A few more workforce questions for you. Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. This also provides an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
Yeah, I mean, I think those ideas are smart, and in general, yes, I'm absolutely supportive. I think sometimes devil is in the details and what that looks like, but yes, local. We dealt with this again back to the county board, where we always tried in a request for proposal process to give additional points in that system of scoring and grading to bidders or to applicants who were hiring local people. It makes sense, right? It generates more tax revenue locally at the state level. To me, it just makes a ton of sense.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this issue, and what do you think should be done about it?
Yeah, I am in some ways painfully aware of this. A couple of things come to mind. One is that my husband is an electrical contractor, union, IBEW, NECA contractor, and the protections for workers that are in place with union contracts make life better for those employees, I believe, and it sets it sets a framework for the employer so that they know what is appropriate for them to do. So that's part of my framework is union contract. I'm a former AFSCME member, so I am familiar with the workforce territory that is a union construct in terms of folks who are treated as independent contractors so that employers can avoid paying unemployment compensation or other benefits are also often not safe places. And so from the county perspective, from an employer perspective, we want to make sure that workplaces are safe and that employees are being treated fairly. Really quick aside, I met a young man at the Vernon County Fair a couple of weeks ago who works in the lumber industry and does not have protections because he is an independent contractor. And to me, an industry like that, it's frightening to me to think of people working in a very dangerous industry like that as an independent contractor, where they don't have somebody advocating for them necessarily, don't have people watching out for those kinds of protections. So this is an issue that really hits home for me, and I think we need to tighten things up.
Moving on to housing, affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some support government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What is your sense of housing as an issue and which best addresses rental housing affordability, rent control, or building more rentals?
Yeah, I have to say, I think in the 96th Assembly District, I'm not sure that rent control is a pressing issue. So this is something that I probably need to learn more about more broadly statewide. But I can tell you that housing is an issue, a concern that I hear about very often as I'm knocking on doors. And it is about affordability. And it's really a supply issue, I think. And so there are some really creative solutions. I mentioned earlier the bipartisan workforce housing legislation that passed last session makes sense to me. There are a number of examples here in the 96. The city of Viroqua is building a housing, a mixed use really, but primarily housing development that will have, I think it's 60 or 70 apartment units and commercial on the first floor, including a daycare center. This will be housing that is affordable and has services like childcare, which is also a pressing issue. So I think when the state can offer,
incentives,
absolutely incentives, and to make sure that the processes for getting those developments up and running are as streamlined as possible, those are a couple of places where I think there is room for improvement.
Healthcare. Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system here in western Wisconsin.
Right.
What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
I think this is a really vexing issue. I think there are a lot of pieces that need to come into play to correct. I think one is expansion of Badger care. Yep. And it needs to be directed at health care. I know that, there are some people who think if you put money into that pot, then you can take from and move it somewhere else, right, into transportation or something else. But so expanding the dollars available for Badger care is, I think, part of the solution. I think it is also the state investing. There's a workforce, a pot of money for healthcare workforce that is matched by the federal government. And if I had the name of it, I would say it, but I don't remember it right now. But a program that really offers incentives to hospitals, to employers, healthcare employers, to put some of their money in with the state. The state money is matched by the federal, and it helps bring in doctors and other providers into Wisconsin. We know that we have great medical college systems, medical college and the UW system, and I don't know the number exactly, but somewhere in the 8 or 9 out of every 10 who come here to school and are, start their residency and their practice in the state are going to stay. Those kinds of incentives make a lot of sense to me, especially in the healthcare system, and hopefully will be part of the solution.
What about mental health care, a concern for many Wisconsinites and for state and county budgets? What are you hearing on that, and what should be done about it?
Yeah, I think I hear some of this on doors, but I also hear as I'm out in the community talking to groups and elected officials. I think definitely mental health is a very important and again, vexing issue, right? Like it underpins the unhoused population and the growth in the unhoused population. I think we are working really well on destigmatizing mental health issues. There needs to be more effort there, and I think it starts with all of us. But I also think that mental health needs to be part of healthcare in general. When I talk about healthcare, I mean coverage for the body, but also mental health services, dental services, eye services, right? Like we've kind of gotten into compartmentalizing those cares into silos, and mental health needs to be part of the comprehensive view of a person's overall health.
You did mention abortion policy as a priority for you. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, just that it's, I'm the mother of a 25-year-old and a 27-year-old who have less rights than I do in this state, and that is unconscionable to me. And that is, honestly, I would guess probably 5 or 6 out of every door that I knock on, this issue comes up.
And codifying Roe is your preferred policy.
Making sure that everyone has full reproductive freedom in the state of Wisconsin.
What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these are addressed, and for the state to keep on schedule with reconstruction of aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
Yeah, I maybe take a little different view on this. The 96th Assembly District is a very rural district. It's actually pretty bifurcated. Vernon County, 830-some square miles, and transportation issues are vexing there. And then the southwest corner of La Crosse County, including the town of Shelby where I live, transportation is a different dynamic. So I am a person who's going to advocate for public transit also, right? Like we have the Smart Bus here, which is a regional, just basically rubber band transit. It's a small bus, and it goes from La Crosse to down to Stoddard. It goes from La Crosse to Westby and to Viroqua. It goes out to Toma, not in the 96th, but it is a regional transit system, and I think we should be investing also in transit solutions we get a lot of talk about roads and, fix the damn roads, as the governor would say, which I think is important. But we also, I think, need to be, from a climate perspective, looking at transit also. We have done great improvements thanks to the infrastructure bill to accommodate bike lanes and to add in facilities to the current roads that we have, to make sure that we are accommodating bicycles, pedestrians more effectively. And I think that's part of smart spending in the transportation realm as well.
PFAS and other water contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how would you propose to address it?
Absolutely. PFAS contaminants is a major issue. We live in the part of the state where it is, we have neighbors who are using bottled water, and that is unacceptable. It's not just PFAS, right? It's nitrates, nitrites, and nitrates. It's other contaminants as well. I think the first thing that has to be done is we need to set a standard. We need to say this is the level beyond which we will not tolerate those contaminants in our water. And I think there's been a lot of talk about PFAS stuff, but that standard setting has not happened, and that's imperative first and foremost. So I would support legislation that sets that standard and measures against that regularly. I think also, to me, I always pair this issue with what Vernon County is facing, which is not necessarily a contaminant issue, but still this clean water issue. And that is, Vernon County is home to 22 earthen dams that were built back in the 50s that were flood mitigation devices. And they are being decommissioned because they have way outlived their life expectancy, and those something has to take its place. And so the issue of climate change that affects rain, that affects how much water is running everywhere, we have to be looking at all of the waterways in the 96th and throughout the state, and making sure that we have clean water across the board, not just avoiding contaminants, but making sure that we are making good decisions about land use so that water is clean everywhere in the state.
We are down to our final two questions.
Okay.
How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
I think the most striking difference is really engagement and experience. Even though the incumbent has that incumbency, there hasn't been a lot of engagement and connection with the community. I come from a background of being very involved in the community, having the 20 years on the county board, 9 as the chair of the La Crosse County Board, and working actively all the time with folks to solve problems in the community. And I think that there's a distance from the incumbent. I think the other big contrast is that this district is now a blue district, and the incumbent was elected in a very, very red gerrymandered district. And so I think there's just a huge disconnect in the values around reproductive freedom, around public school funding, around economic issues like housing and affordable childcare and other things. So I just think that the contrast in values is really striking also.
Final question. Mm-hmm. If you're elected this fall and you get this magic wand you can use in the
not
Capitol,
the magic wand question.
that would be allow you to resolve one issue in a way that brings all parties together, what would be that issue?
You know what? I think it would be probably the one issue would probably be protecting democracy. And for me, that is, there's some specific, there might be some specific legislative parts of that, but I am a very proud local elected official. That was good work. It was important. It made a difference in my community, and I worked hard at it, and I worked with lots of different people to get things done. County boards bring a lot of diversity to them and a lot of points of view. And defending democracy to me is making sure that there is civic engagement on the part of elected officials who are willing to compromise, who are willing to hammer out solutions that are good for the state and the people who live here. And I think that defending democracy, like having trust in local elected officials, having confidence in the work of an elected group of people in the legislative body, it has been lost, especially in recent years. And that is the work that I want to do, is to restore that confidence and build trust and work for solutions, whatever the issue is. We've covered a lot of them today, but defending democracy is getting to work and advocating for the folks in the 96th and reminding them that this is good, important work for all of us.
Well, Tara Johnson of the town of Shelby, the Democratic candidate for the 96th Assembly District, thank you. The election is November 5th. Tara Johnson, thank you again for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.